Welcome to another episode of the JustUS Podcast. I'm here with, once again, my good friend, Tobs26, after his absence for one episode.
What up, people? Sorry for going away, but I'm back.
For today's episode, we'll be taking a look at Power Rangers Time Force, Batman Forever, and Captain America the First Avenger. Let's go from left to right, as always, with Time Force. This was a 2001 Power Rangers season, adapting the previous year's Sentai season, that being Time Ranger. Now, I think it's already fair that the previous PR seasons I covered haven't always been in the best light possible. I mean, Beast Morphers was okay. Dino Fury so far have some improvements over it, but we're not quite done with it yet. And on top of that, Zeo was okay at best, but nothing that special. Dino Charge was fun, but not perfect. And now we're going into Time Force itself. And I gotta say that this is one of the strongest PR seasons out there.
Let's go!
Yeah, if you're not someone that's obsessed with MMPR nostalgia, you're probably one that would think of Time Force as a great show. I mean, admittedly, there's some filler stuff in it, and the music definitely sounds too similar to what we got with Lost Galaxy and Lightspeed Rescue. That being said, Time Force is definitely a smart PR season, and one that knows how to give fans an understanding of how things would work in a somewhat darker tone than what we had previously.
Yeah, one thing that I remember is that this is the one that did the time traveling, right?
Indeed. That is true.
So they had good designs for the villains. I remember that, or the kind of the ones that I liked as a child.
I didn't know you were actually watching Time Force back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched a lot of Power Rangers because there was one channel that had all the old, the old seasons, the old shows of it.
Oh, I presume I kind of forgot that you weren't around during the Neo Saban era, which is fine. Neo Saban era really isn't that great.
Huh.
But yeah, definitely
Yeah, it also had a video game, Time Force. I'm checking that out.
For the PlayStation and for the Nintendo 64, and I think the Game Boy Color as well.
Ooh.
But yeah, the plot itself revolves around the fact that Time Force is a police agency that is from the year 3000. Pretty much into the far future, and in a time period where Power Rangers have evolved from your typical sort of secret heroes. I mean, okay, Lightspeed Rescue established the fact that we can have Rangers with public identities. They no longer have to be just teenagers with attitude or have to hide the secret identities. But it's always great to see when the Power Rangers, our heroes, are in a bigger force than what we usually see. Especially when they're involved with higher up officials like the government and whatnot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a ton of mutants have been going rampant. One of them being Rancic, who escapes from the other Rangers and goes back to the year 2001 after going after Alex, who was the original Time Force Red Ranger that got killed at first. And during that time period, we also get to see the Rangers go back to the year 2001, and they find a ancestor of Alex, that being a person who is known as Wes, which is kind of a surprising thing that they actually stumbled upon him. But he is the son of a businessman known as, the father, basically, which his name kind of forgot me. Alfred? No, Albert. Yeah, I keep thinking Alfred from Batman. Yeah, Albert was pretty much the father
that would be
of
a weird
Wes. Yeah, and now that Wes is involved, the Rangers go after Rancic. Even if we get a bit of beef with Wes as well as Jennifer, the Time Force Pink Ranger, because he may be the new Red Ranger, but he's not the Red Ranger that Jennifer knew. Especially considering the fact that he was killed at the time.
So it starts off with murder, let's say. Who knows?
Yeah, and at this point, we get to deal with stuff like another individual that has an ancient sort of device, which is actually the Quantum Ranger Morpher, and it gets into the hands of a individual known as Eric Myers, who is a member of the Silver Guardians, who are a police force that is involved with the father of Wes, that being Albert, as I now understood the name of. And of course, he's also a rival of Wes. Basically, like, we already know for a fact that sometimes Six Rangers can be evil, but I truly think that, like, that in this case, Eric was more of an anti hero. He was not necessarily like wanting to align himself with the villains, from what I remember, but he was irresponsible with his powers. He used them for his own gain. And after learning what it takes to become a real ranger, he not only becomes like the leader of the Silver Guardians, but he also becomes a proper ally to the Rangers.
Hmm.
I have to say though that it's kind of amusing that the Quantum Ranger has the same similar suit design as Time Force Red, except most of the white has been replaced with black, and his visor as well as his like chest pattern has like a bit of like a zigzag look to it for the edges.
Well, maybe they just grabbed a bucket of paint and bath.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though. Like we barely get to see Rangers with of a similar exact design, but that that might be explained better in Time Force, his Japanese counterpart, Time Ranger. At one
Hmm.
point, Alex returns to the year 2001, and he's thankfully alive. And at first, like he becomes a Red Ranger for a bit, but the rest of the team starts realizing the fact that Alex really wasn't the real Red Ranger, but instead Wes. Unfortunately, he breaks up with Jennifer and gives a morpher to the guy himself, and we pretty much get to see the final act near the end with Rancic trying to make his final assault on Earth. And at first like Alex tells all the Rangers to go back to the future, but that being said, like not all of them got to make it through. Uh, so pretty much like only Wes and Eric can stop Rancic, and thankfully the future has been saved. Although Wes did die in the process, and
Yeah.
the thing that surprised me the most is that even if the future's been saved, like Jennifer doesn't want to see the fact that Wes was killed in battle, so she decides to go back to the year 2001 with the rest of the team and dump Alex.
What?
Yeah, like she doesn't want anything to do with Alex anymore. She much prefers to be with Wes because, like, she's grown to Wes, and Wes is not the same sort of guy that Alex was.
Okay. So wait. I don't know if I'm understanding this well. Like, is she replacing one guy over the same blood?
Yeah, that's
Like
kind of a
the.
weird thing. Like, it's kind of hard to explain too because of like their future being altered and whatnot. But in his defense, he's not really the same sort of like. It's not like it's some sort of incest thing. Like I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain without me thinking about that one gag from Family Guy where, uh, like Marty McFly bangs his like the past version of his mother, and they have like this weird bastard child, literal one at that.
Yeah.
But while most of the villains have been taken down, Rantic's daughter, Nadira, gets nearly killed, and instead of actually fighting against the Rangers, Rancic decides to surrender himself. Yes, You heard that right.
Wait,
A villain willingly gave up the fight.
that's that's odd. But like, is there a reason that they later on explain it?
His daughter was nearly killed in the battle, and
Oh,
instead of wanting to leave, like risk her life getting hurt even more, he decides that he's done, and he has a change of character afterwards.
okay. That's a good twist. It is justified.
Yeah, and thankfully, everyone returns to normal. Wes and Jennifer get together, and meanwhile, Eric starts to be involved with the Silver Guardians, and Time Force from there becomes not just a season of 2001, but a season of years to come because, in one way or another, much like Mighty Morphin, Time Force comes back to influence a different season to some capacity.
Huh. Wait, hold on. You didn't tell me that Beast Boy was in Power Rangers Time Force.
Yeah, I'm about to get into the characters. Like you already know for a fact that Jennifer is the Pink Ranger and Wes is the Red
Yeah,
Ranger of the team.
yeah, yeah.
But we also have Trip, who's our Green Ranger, and he's kind of I believe he was meant to be like an alien from the future that looks humanoid. That might be something that I kind of forgot about because I was mostly thinking about like the quality of the story writing. But he was fun, and I like seeing him
Like
bond.
Beast Boy.
Yeah, it definitely looks like Beast Boy in some ways, and he's a small one too. Like it kind of makes even more sense considering his like how he's a short guy. He's even shorter than our Yellow Ranger, Katie, who's like a strong one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she's like a strong Yellow Ranger. I mean, in Japan, sometimes the Yellow Rangers were male, and the U.S. wanted to add more diversity, which is perfectly fine. Made or you made some of the male Yellow Rangers female. Although in this case, like they had to make our Yellow Ranger like this, like more stronger. Like I don't want to say muscular exactly, but like bigger woman, and it worked out quite well. It's an interesting dynamic between like this big woman, like not Amazonian type, but you know where I'm going at, as well as how her body frame juxtaposes our Green Ranger, who's kind of like a small guy, but they make a great couple together.
The biggest guy, though, seems to be the Blue Ranger.
Yep. The second in command of the team, his name is Lucas, who definitely reminds me of
Oh,
George Lucas and my dog Lucas.
yeah, makes sense. I mean, were you thinking about this, Lucas, when you named your dog Lucas, or not?
Not quite, because I was mainly thinking about George Lucas from like the guy himself when I was looking at my dog's face, and I thought to myself,
Uh,
"Oh, you kind of remind me of Lucas, George Lucas from the face expressions."
Kinda, yeah.
Yep, and yeah, Ranger team is a pretty good one overall. I think the more interesting ones are the two couples, Jen and Wes, Trip and Katie. Lucas doesn't get as much attention, sadly, but he is has his moments, and Eric definitely gets a spotlight because he's a Sixth Ranger and because of his character being different from the previous Six Rangers at the time. Like Tommy from Mighty Morphin season one was initially a bad guy that turned good, and he got himself a power upgrade. Jason from Zeo was pretty much a pre-established character, so I already know about him. Uh, Zane from In Space was kind of like the only surviving member of Andros's team before we got to meet the Turbo Rangers, and the Magna Defender was either the original Magna Defender or Mike, the brother of Leo, becoming the successor. And of course, there's also the Titanium Ranger, who is best known for being an American creation of Power Rangers.
Interesting.
All the other characters we have are like do their jobs perfectly fine. especially like Albert Collins, who's Wes's dad. He wants Wes to be in his own sort of like role in a way. And most notably, he did not like seeing the fact that his son was becoming a Power Ranger. It was too dangerous for him. He didn't want him to be in like this sort of responsibility. But nonetheless, Wes moved along and decided that it was best for him to be a hero, which his father later accepted.
Okay, and that's fulfilling.
We also get ourselves an Alpha 5 type of character, that being Circuit, who is a robotic owl. And I think maybe had a life size toy. I don't know if he did, but he did the job okay.
I mean, it's there are high chances that it did. Why wouldn't they?
Marketing purposes, unless they didn't want to make as much as they didn't want to make like 12-inch versions of the female Rangers.
uh, yeah, I don't know there, but the owl robot was kind of cute
It
and
was,
cool.
yeah. No complaints about it there. Definitely like a much more interesting character than Larigo from Turbo.
To shots fired.
And as for our villains, like Frax, Gluto, and Vipra definitely have their spotlights, but the ones that stick out to me the most are Rancic and Nadira, mainly because of the fact that Rancic was like a mutant of sorts, and he was definitely one of the more human-looking villains in PR history. Most of the time, like villains that we usually see in PR, either like costumes looking or armor or aliens. Not saying that we never had any human aliens before. I mean, Rita Repulsa is one of the first, and second being Scorpina, and by extent, some extent, Lord Zed. But like Rancic definitely had more of a human feel to him compared to anyone else, especially considering the fact that he has a bond with his daughter that I think Time Force explained very well. And it's stuff like this, as well as other villains such as, you know, Mesagog and Grum, that I don't think modern day PR can do that well.
Wait. Hold on. Rancic is the guy that had like the metal thing in his face,
Yeah,
kind of like the cyborg from Doom Patrol.
yeah, he did in a way.
Let's not start a conflict here, okay?
Rancic. Cyborg Rancic? Anyways, but yeah, definitely a great cast of characters as well as a good story. As for the rest of the franchise, like in terms of the story, uh, the episodes that we have gotten are pretty fun to delve into. And I will say that I dug looking for stuff like uh, like some of the moments where we got to see them actually debate over, typical commentary on uh, discrimination. Because I know for a fact at one point they mentioned that they don't really destroy monsters, but they instead like freeze them.
Yeah.
And we also get to get like show an understanding of how Jen herself is a much more aggressive Pink Ranger. Like usually people when they think of Pink Rangers, they think that they're girly and whatnot. But she's not only the boss of the team, despite there being a Red Ranger, but she's also like much more like a bit more cold at the shoulder than your typical Kimberly or typical uh, like Mia. She's much more like separate from the team. She's not quite as like I don't want to say human, but like more separated in terms of emotion.
Okay.
Like, at one point, she wants to go after like a monster or a mutant that like she desperately wants to kill for personal reasons, and the rest of the team like needed to like go after her for like that sort of logic. Like stuff like that really isn't suitable for a ranger. Like a personal grudge is definitely not what they would want to go after. It's the main thing would pretty much be to do their job.
Hmm.
And of course, we can't forget about stuff like the crossover with Lightspeed Rescue, which was a pretty good one. Like the crossover between Lightspeed and Time Force was honestly better than the crossover with Lost Galaxy and Lightspeed, simply because you know, like okay, when they did the crossover between when they do crossovers with one season or another, I am more used to seeing them make brand new footage instead of them trying to adapt a Sentai movie, especially since
Yeah,
like we can that back then there was proof that we can make our own shows to some extent. I mean, for hell, this was a time period when they used to put out battleizers, but
yeah, yeah.
definitely a much stronger team up than what we got with Lightspeed Rescue. I love seeing the characters. I love seeing them interact with each other, and I also liked seeing uh, the two different sort of Six Rangers we got, because Titanium Ranger was a different guy from the Quantum Ranger. Titanium Ranger's raised by demons, and at one point in his life, after one of the villains went up to the father of both him and his Pink Ranger at a young age, and said that that he can save his son, but the only risk would be that he would be raised by the demons instead. As we mentioned before, Quantum Ranger is like an anti-hero basically.
Hmm. But like historically, they always done that, and I'm glad
Yeah,
it kind of feels good in the dynamic.
yeah. And in the case of PR, it's like pretty new and something that I don't think they do as frequently in the Neo Saban era, and maybe the Hasbro era, but we'll see.
Oh yeah.
We also got other episodes that we got that were quite interesting include stuff like the uh, when the Rangers were going through weird movie madness, and it was kind of like one of those funny moments that we got for the series.
Funny moments.
Yep. Even though Time Force is kind of a dark season, it definitely has moments of its own where it's much more humorous at times.
Would you say that the target audience was um the usual?
Yeah. See, back then, when the writers were smart back then, like from In Space to RPM, their main idea
Hmm.
was more than just selling toys, but to make a general audience appeal of Power Rangers. So, like Neo Sabawa pretty much want to target it to the 5 to 7 year olds and only focus on the next 5 to 7 year olds in the next season. Whereas from In Space to RPM, you could definitely tell that they're making shows that felt more like they were going for an older audience. We kind of got a bit of a soft reboot with Ninja Storm Returns to the Age Group. But I would say that as we went along, the tones would definitely vary from like light to dark at times. I'm not super
Oh,
edge or anything. It's just that I like the more varied tones for each season, but the quality was still consistent. It felt like something you could watch as a kid and still watch if you're an older person.
okay. Then that means they did something difficult and good,
Yeah,
or in a good way.
yeah. I kind of miss when kids shows used to be something anyone could watch for like
Yeah.
a established franchise, like stuff like SpongeBob. Like kids can watch, but older people would still enjoy. Uh,
Hmm.
even if you're not like a fan of grew up with these shows back then. Uh, Ben 10 is a good example of that for the most part, and it's kind of something that I miss with stuff like Power Rangers because I remember Dawson Rider reviewing the crossover between Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder, and he said that it makes him miss when PR used to be something so cool even at his age, whereas he feels embarrassed to like the Neo Saban era because it just felt so like laid back and not as high quality of storytelling and writing. It just felt more like made specifically for the 5 to 7 year olds.
Yeah. Yeah, and usually when they lower that quality and they start caring less, the kids are not fully perceptive about it, so they keep watching. But people who are slightly older notices that, and they're just turned off.
Yeah, Like I hate to go into like a bit of a debate with this sort of thing, but I remember watching the last three episodes of Dino Fury on
Yeah.
Netflix for Army of the Dead for my second rewatch, as well as to give Sailor Moon Eternal a shot.
Hmm.
And like I felt kind of bored watching the Dino Fury episodes. I was like, yeah, it's all right, but not I wasn't as interested in those as I was with rewatching Dino Thunder, Wild Force, Jungle Fury
Yeah.
on YouTube when the official channel uploaded those because writing and storytelling characters were more interesting.
Yep. I get you.
But there's one thing people remember most about Time Force beyond the character development and the storytelling. Sadly, one of them is the censorship that was made because
Oh.
2001 was a sad year at one point where it was known for the 9/11 attacks towards the Twin Towers, the Trade Center,
Yeah.
like major unfortunate event, and as a result, a lot of media had to censor its own stuff that related to buildings getting damaged.
Oh, yeah. Like kind of like how Spider-Man had to
Yeah,
censor that trailer or certain scenes with the Twin Towers.
yeah, and it's especially like something that's surprising because that was definitely a tragic year, and to my knowledge, a moment like this that didn't involve a terrorist attack to that extent at the time period. And before someone else mentioned something like it's more related to it, like I'm referring to 9/11 because it's like a more significant event.
Yeah, I mean, you can always debate about uh, different, like other tragedies, and oh no, this was worse, this other was worse. But for the American lifestyle, the
9/11 is much
the
more like
yeah, the
well
nine
known,
eleven was completely like
infamous.
it just changed everything. It changed all the context of that country.
It was also infamous as well.
Yeah.
So back to Time Force, like definitely a lot of stuff was censored regarding like any signs of like I remember there was being like a building that one of the Megazords was standing on for the opening shot of the show. I think that was a Twin Towers. I don't know if that was in there in the Japanese version, Time Ranger, but that was cut out for future airings. The threat made by Rancic involving buildings getting destroyed was cut out for future airings. And to my knowledge, the Shout Factory DVD releases of Time Force have not restored those scenes. Not that they need to, but I kind of was surprised by that because you would think they would do that now that uh, the sort of like like the sort of impact 9/11 has been lessened. I mean, we have
Hmm.
movies and TV shows where buildings get damaged at times, so
Yeah.
maybe we were hoping for something like that. It's just kind of unusual that something like that happened, that we don't get like the
Yeah.
proper scenes.
Yeah, I never fully got it because it's kind of like what happened lately with this type of censorship of old animations or old movies like uh, I forgot the name, but
Yeah,
yeah, never mind. It's just that it doesn't make sense because you're not given the chance of your audience to make like some type of retrospective to historical events that maybe could be useful to understand better our current times and the future. So
and it's
I'm not on board with that.
yeah. Though the only like if that's not the case, the only other reason I could think of is the fact that maybe the old footage was not available. It was lost,
Oh
and
yeah.
maybe at the time concerned the fact that Power Rangers wasn't quite given the same level of attention that it did in its 20th anniversary. That might be the only answer I can think of. But the only other thing I can think of when it comes to Time Force is the fact that people remember it being where it gave a tribute towards Tui Thing, who passed away around like an earlier part of September that year. If you don't know who
Yeah.
she is, she was like the first like Yellow Ranger in the show. She played Trini Kwan, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, in
I,
retrospect, if
I've heard her like being mentioned. It was a kind of
yeah,
thing. at one time.
she definitely left a big gap in
Yeah.
the like original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers lineup the same way Paul Magasiva left a big gap. Although one thing that sucks is that like we don't get a proper honor or tribute towards Paul Magasiva the same way Tui Thing did, which is pretty shitty if you ask me, Hasbro.
Ah, Hasbro.
Damn you, Hasbro! But that being said, Time Force is still a great show to watch, and one of my favorite seasons of all time. So many future seasons should learn from it, and if you want to make it an engaging story with good characters and dynamic arcs, don't try to go for the same sort of Mighty Morphin tropes. Instead, look at seasons like this, think of ways you can like learn from them, and make the best damn show possible. That's what I was kind of hoping for with Beast Morphers, and yeah, while it was a fun show to watch, it was not as memorable or engaging as Time Force was. And if you're like someone that's new to Power Rangers, I definitely recommend watching stuff from In Space to RPM, one of them being Time Force.
Cool.
Next up, we'll be talking about Batman Forever, which, if you remember previously on my YouTube channel, we made fun of Batman and Robin, which was made because a certain someone tried to start a warfare with me with one of my favorite characters. And it was petty as hell, yes, but it was fun to make fun of the stupid movie nonetheless. I might be thinking, what do we think of Batman Forever? And by extension, the previous two movies? Well, for now, I'll share my thoughts on Batman Forever. It's okay. You know, I think too many people get hate for, or I think the movie gets too much hate from people just because it's associated with Joel Schumacher. It's different from the other two movies that came before it. But I don't think it's that bad of a film, if I'm being honest. What do you think?
No, me neither. I mean, if we compare them to the previous two, yeah, maybe there was disappointment, but the movie itself was also sort of like a Justice League case because I keep hearing today that there is a Joel Schumacher cut. Am I right?
Yeah, but here's the thing that has been present for demand possibly since 2005 when they brought back the old movies. I think during the time Batman Begins was in theaters.
Ah, so it is an old thing.
Yep. And from that time period, there's been talks about the announcement of a potential director's cut or extended version, but none of the films received extended cuts.
Did Schumacher make any comment about it?
I think Joel Schumacher did, but it's been a long time since I saw those interviews. Those date back to a long time. And the last time I really delved into that sort of history was back when Batman v Superman was in theaters, and I was like super excited to learn about Batman and Superman lore. The only thing I like learned about those older films before the film came out in theaters, like I was pumped to like learn about the history of Batman and Superman, and like from the comics, the animation, the movies. So to think about the fact that we got not just a different take on Batman in a way from going from Returns to Forever, but there's a like an extended cut of it was kind of a surprise.
Yeah, yeah. Even more back then when it wasn't that common to hear about cuts. You're like, what? Why wouldn't they release that? Probably doesn't exist. But then something about Snyder happened, and
Well,
now we can never be sure.
before that, there was actually Richard Donner's cut of Superman 2, which was different
Yeah.
from the theatrical version. Fans discovered that sort of thing 3 years like before it was announced, and since Batman Begins was out in theaters, like or since Superman Returns was out in theaters at the time, and like during the home video release, they also accompanied that with Superman 2's Richard Donner cut. It would make sense in retrospect to put in the extended version of the older films of Batman to go with the release of Batman Begins, right?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like you got the new movie for your new audiences, and you want to make your older films a little more special as well, so they don't feel like just older films that are trying to take the spotlight for the new thing.
Yeah. Also, Blade Runner had another version of the same movie.
Yep. But we'll go back on the Schumacher cut thing in a bit. The film itself is like tone like plot wise not that different from what we had previously. While a little more watered down from Returns, it's more or less on the same sort of pace that we got with the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we get not just the introduction towards the Two-Face, we'll talk about it in a bit, but we also get involved with stuff like the Riddler or Edward Nygma, who is a worker of Bruce's company, Wayne Enterprises. And we also get to see how he becomes a Riddler simply because he works on these devices and wants to really, really, really impress Bruce.
Yeah.
Along the way, when all this crazy stuff goes on with Batman and Two-Face, uh, like this chick Nicole Kidman plays, whose name I'm kind of forgetting, so I'm going to call her Nicole. She pretty much gets involved with Batman stuff and wants to be romantically involved with him.
Aww.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, and it's kind of weird too. Like when we see Bruce talk about his emotions towards her, especially while they're investigating stuff about who could be behind all the crime scenes involving Two Face and Riddler. Like he once told Alfred that he's never been in love with a woman like that before. But like that's weird because you have not just Catwoman from the previous movie Returns, but from the first movie you had Vicky Vale.
Yeah.
Maybe
Doesn't
he,
sound
yeah,
coherent, but who
like
knows? Maybe Bruce is being honest
yeah.
or not.
And also, like we never got any word of what happened to Catwoman, nor did we get anything regarding Vicky. Like maybe,
Yeah.
like in my head canon, Catwoman has been like a mystery. Bruce has moved on from her, whereas Vicky Vale at one point was killed by that universe's Harley Quinn, as she wanted to avenge her. Like okay, when they were writing the scripts for the fifth movie, the idea was for Harley Quinn to be the Joker's daughter, which
You.
which juxtaposes her being like the love interest of the Joker.
Yeah. You. It
Yeah,
doesn't sound too good.
it's not. It's as bad as making Bane some sort of thug instead of this intelligent brute.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just something I came up with for why Catwoman nor Vicky were mentioned. And
Yeah. It's a good explanation.
moving forward, we also get to see the introduction towards Dick Grayson and his team, the Flying Graysons, at a circus, which it was a decent like way to introduce Dick into the episode or film episode. What the fuck? Like,
If
yeah,
you see it from the episodic type of view of movies, then yeah, you're not
yeah,
wrong.
it definitely episodic in a way because like you don't really get that much continuity between them.
Mm.
But yeah, like we get to see the death of the Graysons. Robin is brought in with Bruce. At first, like I don't think Bruce was like ready to like raise his kid or care for him. Although now like both of the lives have changed forever when Dick Grayson discovers the fact that this rich guy is actually Batman, who didn't really get the help in saving the family. And now, like Bruce Wayne realizes the fact that this kid he now has to take care of is got a past similar to his. Yeah, and
Getting the flashback.
yeah, the flashbacks to the death of the Waynes, as well as which connects well with the death of the Graysons. And I think that's a pretty good like story plot when it comes to connecting these two, because usually Batman and Robin might be seen by the casuals as either like this sort of campiness to them, which is why people might be more used to seeing like the Bat Family as a complete team, or they might like think that this sort of dynamic duo like sort of chemistry is outdated, or they might think it's gay just to insult them as he did it in the past to make fun of the '60s Batman. Not that I endorse that thing, but that's just something I noticed from some parodies. And of
uh,
course, we are used to seeing but like we're also used to seeing like the sort of campiness when it comes to the chemistry that they share in the old stuff. But I do think that the sort of like relationship, sort of like differences, comparisons that they have for Batman Forever were good in theory, in concept. The execution could be better because they don't focus on that as much. Like I was really hoping we get to see more of like Bruce training Dick to become this cool like sidekick. Like it would have been an awesome movie to have the two form a friendship. Learn that they're not so different from one another and become the dynamic duo.
yeah.
I mean, instead, it feels like most of the attention is put towards like Jim Carrey's Riddler just because Jim Carrey's famous. And I like Jim Carrey. He's a good guy, but he's not supposed to be the main focus. He's supposed to be one of the main focuses.
Yeah.
Like he gets a lot of the attention put towards him, even more than like Two Face, who I think is the real enemy because like he's a bad guy from start to finish. But like it's just so unusual that he's supposed to be the main villain, yet they put all the attention towards the Riddler, especially in the marketing, just because he's Jim Carrey. And I haven't even got to the
Yeah.
actual characterization of him yet. But after most of the stuff we usually see, at one point, Jim Carrey's Riddler starts realizing the fact that Bruce Wayne is actually Batman, and the two get into like there's a fight that goes on, and during like the showcase of a device that reads people's minds. Riddler and Two Face at one point confront Wayne Manor and start preparing to like beat Bruce's ass. And Bruce Wayne has no memory of what happened. And it wasn't until he, I don't know, probably like got a memory of what happened or something. Like, it's kind of hard to explain because that part of Batman Forever I kind of forgot about, where he has no memory of what happened after he got knocked out. But I do know for a fact that the deleted scene was supposed to show him reading a journal from his father, which talked about how like his father wanted, like he didn't want to feel bad for his son for wanting to watch a movie or a play that was going on at the time when he was a kid, and he wanted to take him out and let him see it. So, because in that movie, Bruce Wayne thought he was guilty, or he thought he was to blame for getting his parents killed, because he thought he wanted to go out and to see the play. And at that
Yeah.
one point, Bruce Wayne confronts a giant holographic bat that finally lets him realize the fact that he is indeed Batman Forever.
Ooh.
But
Poetic.
they cut that scene out.
No.
Like, of all the things you want to remove, that should not be one of them. That should be like the defining trait of the character. The recasting I could forgive if they kept it in a scene like this. And like Val Kilmer, I'll get into him in a bit, but I think he's fine. I just wish we got a scene like this because like his character in this film is not that bad. And like, but the fact that they removed this scene just kind of makes it feel like what are you trying to do? Are you trying to separate his past? Like because this was meant to be like the defining moment. If they had kept this scene in the film, it'd probably be one of the best scenes of Batman Forever. Probably raise it up higher than it currently is. Sadly, that is not the case.
Dude, I just wanted to say that. I mean, the movie itself is not bad. It just changes slightly what it was
It's supposed to
coming
be.
up before. Like you have that change of aesthetic because of course Tim Burton is more gothic
Yeah,
in his art,
I'll get to that
and
in a
here maybe
bit.
more colors, but that doesn't mean that it's bad.
Yeah,
It just
we'll talk
and
about
it's not
that in a
like
bit again.
complete change of tone. It's just slightly complete, a slightly change of tone.
Yeah, like that's something I want to get into in a bit because, like, I want to talk about like the final battle itself. Um, Apart from the vehicles that we get, like in the typical fight that we have, it's not that great. I mean, and I wasn't expecting a huge amount of action, but it was just some sort of lame trap that Robin and Nicole Kidman were in, and Bruce Wayne makes one of the easiest riddles before destroying the device and messing up Edward's mind. And he also is going to make Batman Does Not Kill freaks lose their pants and their shit and their cum and their piss when he gets Two Face killed by throwing all these coins.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
how amusing. And of course, the movie ends in a typical fashion. And I do believe there was a scene where, uh, like Nicole Kidman's character asks Alfred if it's truly over, and he says it never is over. Before we get to see like a decent shot of Batman and Robin running from the I think it was the bat signal. Yeah, it is the bat signal. What am I talking about? It is like that's the thing that's the most defining trait of Batman, or one of the most defining things of the character, the bat signal.
Yeah.
Although I kind of like it is kind of interesting because we usually see the characters in like standing on a rooftop or like a gargoyle statue during the bat signal scene. But in this case, it's running from the signal as it go into action, kind of like in the '60s intro, most notably.
Uh,
It's a decent shot. I can't hate it too much. It's fine. So, as far as story is concerned, it's mixed. There are things I like about the story, and there's things I don't. The tone is the most notable issue because, like, it has a mix between the gothic nature of the first two movies, as you mentioned, and it has some campy moments in it. Not to the same extent as Batman and Robin, but they're still there.
yeah. And also, maybe it doesn't have enough seriousness when it was in the process of editing for you to truly engage with what is being like told.
Well,
But I don't know.
like
I was young.
there are serious moments in it. It's just that at times it feels more like it has that sort of like campiness to it. Like not to the same extent of Batman and Robin, where it feels like a parody, but it just feels like
Mm,
a strange mix between humor and
yeah,
like the lightness and the darkness of the film.
yeah. Sort of. I don't want to use the word messy because nowadays I hate it after everything that happens. But it is messy. I mean, if you expect to change something from an artist, then it's gonna remain a bit messy aftermath.
Indeed, and even with the aesthetics, like at times you get a sort of gothic feel, but only in some instances. Whereas for the most part, like it goes from subtle to outrageous with like the colors and the visuals. Like
Yeah,
the fact that Gotham City has like these sort of gangs that have neon colors in them definitely screams '90s. The same sort of way I kind of mentioned, where it feels like you're going into these like video game commercials where it's less about the game and more about the crazy visuals that try to convince you and buy the game.
yeah.
Don't forget
Uh,
the like the most amusing thing about that being uh the way everyone sort of acts at times, if that makes sense. Like it's just kind of amusing how some stuff is like kind of more like definitely like set in a specific time period, whereas here it just seems much more modern by comparison. I mean, hell,
yeah.
the Batmobile definitely looks more aggressive than the previous one, which I prefer the older design because it just looks so much more Batman-like, whereas this one just looks more like a shark.
True.
That's kind of
I,
amusing.
I never got that design. Why, is there a reason why it looked like that?
My theory is because they want to make it look more distinct. They want to give it a bit of a different identity to it, but at the same time, it's kind of it just looks more shark-like than it does Batman or Batmobile. Not that every Batmobile has to be the same Burton design. Like the Batman v Superman design and the Arkham designs both know how to feel like Batmobiles. Obviously, they're much more modern and more realistic, but they know how to have that sort of Batmobile spirit to them.
Yeah, the movie itself is a mixed bag. So it's common to see. Well, it's common that when you look back, there was controversy,
Yep.
but it doesn't commit any type of crime. It is just an okay movie, and if you like the characters, then it doesn't humiliate them. It just portrays them differently, which is fine. I
Well,
don't know. What do you think?
Two-Face was definitely like the one that stood out to me the most because in the first Batman
Yeah.
movie, he was portrayed by Billy D, a black person, and in Batman Forever, he's portrayed by Tommy Lee Jones, a white person, which
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, the change in aesthetics, I can understand this as like Gotham City being filled with less crime. Val Kilmer being our Bruce Wayne Batman guy, I could see this as like him going to the Lazarus pits if there was a version of Ra's al Ghul in this universe. The change
Hmm.
from Val Kilmer and from Tommy Lee Jones after initially being Billy D, I cannot justify.
I wonder who can.
Like, it's kind of like when someone tries to say, "Oh, it's a multiverse thing," when it comes to like the fact that initially we all thought that the Batman movie was going to be a prequel to Ben Affleck's story before we found out that it's not.
Yeah, I think the only one capable of justifying that is Toby Emmerich.
Yep, friggin' dumbass Topi Emmerich, Emmer bitch. But yeah, this is a different Warner Brothers back then, where they didn't even know about the fact that their character was previously a different character, like a different actor, and different race. Oops. Maybe you could have,
Whoopsie daisy.
maybe you could have like retconned this by naming with someone else. Like I don't know, it's gonna be hard to do. Not like it matters anyhow. And God is mad at me for even trying to do that comparison because I hear a thunderstorm. But moving on,
Damn.
already mentioned Jim Carrey's Riddler to some extent. He definitely gets all the spotlight, and he's kind of like similar to the Mask, his previous character, except DC. Like I don't really like his outfits that much, which is the main thing. Like he wears this spandex with question marks all over it. Like give us a nice looking suit with green on it. Oh, and I also don't
But
like his character that much. He definitely tried like him and Jim Carrey act like or him and Two Face act too much like cartoons. Whereas
and
like
that's the thing. That's the thing with the villains in this movie. They are too cartoonish, but not in a because I mean with Tim Burton they were also cartoonish, but not in a way that it would become totally unrealistic.
yeah, Joker felt
Out
like
of
a Joker and
yeah,
Penguin felt like a penguin.
yeah,
Whereas Jim Carrey and Two Face, or Riddler and Two Face, or Riddler and Tommy Lee Jones, or those two, they felt like they were just goofballs.
exactly.
And Robin's character, well, we already already explained why we don't like him in Batman and Robin, but I will say here he was decent. Like his suit was still not the best looking because it was similar to like the Batman suit, and of course they both had the nipples on them as well as the infamous suit up scenes with Batman having a shot of his ass when he turned around. But I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say that this Robin was better than the Batman and Robin because he just felt much more like natural. He wasn't just like always going like, "Oh, you don't trust me because I want to go after Poison Ivy." Like he was more like,
Oh man, that Robin is infuriating and annoying, and
yeah.
just
And
shut
here
him up.
he's actually decent, and I didn't hate him when I like watched the scenes. In fact, I thought him going up against the gang when he stole the car was like a decent scene. But before we wrap up the segment, I have some thoughts to say about the Schumacher cut. Now, to my knowledge, this was a new trend that happened around the time the Snyder cut got attention and was also officially announced by Zack. But I do believe that before then, there were talks of director's cuts, as mentioned before, and ultimately, Batman Forever did not receive an extended edition of itself back in 2005, which sucks because I would love to see them do a more fulfilling take on Batman Forever. You know, one that feels more close to what we should have gotten. And it's funny that Warner Brothers is obsessed with trying to win people over from the nostalgia crew with stuff like Wonder Woman 1984 and soon with The Flash when they bring back Michael Keaton's Batman. And all the times they reference Christopher Reeve's Superman. But the truth is that if they're interested in doing stuff like that, why can't they bring back, the extended edition of Batman Forever? Because that would also be a way to win over some nostalgia people. I know Batman Forever is more notorious than the Burton films, but come on, like you want to go in all nostalgia, but you don't want to like go all the way in. Just be gonna be selective. It's like nice try, guys. As for me, witnessing the Schumacher cut, well, that'd be a nice treat, but I wouldn't expect it to have the same sort of hype or excitement that Batman v Superman's Ultimate Edition had. Nor would I expect it, but I wouldn't expect it to have the same sort of hype that the Snyder Cut had, because the difference is that the Snyder Cut was an entirely different film from what we got with Justice. Also, on top of the fact that the Snyder Cut was more of like what we should have gotten, whereas Justice was more of like Warner Brothers trying to make their version of the film, but it ended up sucking because it tried to compete with the MCU, and appealing to the critics that will still hate them anyhow. As for the Schumacher cuts, well, we'll see if it turns out good or not because, like, I'm not having too many high hopes at this point, and considering how selective Warner Brothers is, it'd be funny to see them actually go in on it or not. But I haven't had my hopes up for that.
Yeah, no, let's try to move on next to Captain America because I gotta leave in like
All
20
right.
minutes.
So overall, Batman Forever is a movie that is decent, but not one I really would want to revisit anytime soon because, well, there's just sort of a thing about it that makes me feel bad for Joel Schumacher or Burton or everyone involved. This could have been like the perfect like third Batman movie for whatever series it had, but unfortunately, it ends off with like the sort of weird transition from the gothic nature of Burton to the sort of more like studio driven nature of Batman and Robin.
Mm.
Not a bad film. Maybe you can watch it if you want on its own. Like if you're not interested in doing a marathon with the two Burton films or the Dark Knight trilogy or even the Snyderverse, despite those having more than just Batman involved, you can watch it on its own and just enjoy it for what it is. It's not Batman
Yeah,
and Robin bad, but I expect better.
true. I couldn't have said it better.
And finally, we'll be taking a look at Captain America: The First Avenger, which was the fifth Marvel Cinematic Universe film made in 2000 and from 2008 to 2012, which was Phase One, and it was also released in 2011. The first time we get ourselves two MCU films per year, which was a thing that happened in that year as well as 2014, 2013, and 2015 and 2016. So pretty much most of Phase One and Two.
Yeah.
And since we covered Captain America, it's like a sort of spin-off show, The Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's kind of made me want to revisit this sort of film because, like, you might not agree with me on this, but I think the first Captain America movie is just like the best one of the trilogy so far.
Comparing it, well, I don't know if I can agree, but what I can say is that the character of Captain America definitely grew a lot. And I don't know if it was organic or not now that I see back, but Captain America First Avenger is quite alright. It's not my favorite origin movie, not even close, but it does what it needs to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, well, it might not be as like iconic of an origin story as something like Spider-Man or Batman Begins or Man of Steel or even like the first Iron Man and Incredible Hulk film from the MCU. It does a job all right, and I kind of miss the sort of like quality MCU where like it felt like less about the gimmicks of the Easter eggs and more about just being a damn good film.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, I don't know if I should go right into it, but my main problems with the movie is just that maybe the pace of it doesn't convince me ever, even though I watched it like 3 times. And I like Chris Evans at first, but then I start like losing him once the movie starts progressing. Then I started liking him again, well, slightly a bit in Avengers and Winter Soldier. But at first, it wasn't one of. In fact, I would say it was one of my least favorite characters in the Avengers.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I think the moment I started to like him less and less was around Age of Ultron, and more so in Civil War. Simply because like the direction they took him was kind of like abrupt, and especially considering what Civil War was, which was basically trying to riff on the like attention put towards Batman v Superman. It was kind of and it was no surprise that the character would had to be a victim of my dislike towards what the MCU was becoming at the time.
Yeah, it's not a cap. It's not the Cap's fault. It's more like Disney's fault. and
Additionally,
to yeah, and Kevin Feige. I mean,
yep. I also have to say about the thing about this sort of franchise is like what makes Captain America 1 work so well is the fact that it was in a different time period. Like it was during like World War II, and you definitely got the sort of like different like history feel to it. It was much more distinct from what we usually get because everything else
hmm
was in a modern setting, basically.
yeah. Okay, that's another thing that I'm gonna dispute about because I'm not a huge fan of war movies, and when they are done very well, it's when I like them. So when they are like half the way, sort of Captain America's type of halfway done in the whole Bellic situation, then it doesn't convince me. So sorry that I'm going against your opinions, but it's kind of like that. I'm not a big fan.
Well, there's moments where we have disagreements on it, but that's no biggie because
Yeah,
this kind of film is actually one that I knew some people would actually like or not quite like. I know for a fact that some people still prefer Winter Soldier. I think it's an okay film, but I just prefer this one because it felt more unique.
yeah, I can see that because I like far more type of spy thriller movies. That's why I slightly prefer Winter Soldier. I don't think it's absolutely amazing, but it's quite okay, quite good. And with First Avenger, it just doesn't convince me. I already said that, but it's just like that in my case.
Which is perfectly fine. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But I will say that I did find it kind of like abrupt with the way we got into one guy, like one of the friends of Cap, Steve, getting killed. But the thing happened during the, uh, like, when he became a super soldier.
hmm
But I think that was the only pacing issue I had. Otherwise, the rest of the film was well paced. I like the action that we had. Definitely more reliant on like less like practical effects. It was especially nice to see them like the transition of Captain America going from mere rookie to uh, being our super soldier to then becoming much more uh, the Captain America we
Yeah,
saw or more familiar with, and one we'd see in the future. Well, for the most part.
yeah. Wait, I also want to mention that I did like the way they used practical effects, but it was just out of the MCU vibe that they gave previously, so I didn't get it completely.
Let's say
Although,
it's like a phase one sort
although,
of vibe.
yeah, it was kind of like a phase one thing, which I like. Like for example, the practical effects in Thor, which aren't that many, I really like them.
I do too. Plus, it definitely has a sort of feeling of like a more, uh, well, maybe in this case not to the same extent as with the first Iron Man, the first Incredible Hulk, and the first Thor movies, but It feels more like it's made by someone with a vision. Whereas you look at Iron Man 2 and the Avengers, and they feel more studio driven.
Yeah, yeah,
Even if
yeah.
Avengers was like had the like sort of DNA that Creepo Joss had, that still feels studio driven.
Hmm. Oh, I did like Red Skull.
Yeah,
I did like it.
he was a great guy in that film, and I like the way he looked, and his voice by Hugo Weaving was good. Kind of amusing that Hugo Weaving was in two blockbuster hits that involve Paramount's release. This before Disney got ownership rights of Phase One's MCU films, or the MCU's Phase One films, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon, which I covered in the last episode, and that was Hugo Weaving's last time he voiced Megatron, since he wanted to move on from other stuff, and Frank Welker took over as the voice in the films.
uh, well, but congrats to him. He always did a good job.
Yeah. Although in terms of like Transformer Megatron movie voice, I prefer Hugo Weaving because he sounded more menacing. But Frank Welker works well for like when Megatron started to get older. But that's a different story. As for the rest of the first Captain America movie, I'd say the rest of the characters did an alright job. uh, I thought Bucky was alright in this film. Definitely not as memorable as he was in Winter Soldier and onwards, where he was like the Winter Soldier
Yeah.
himself, having this sort of
In
like
fact, I just didn't like Bucky in the first movie. I couldn't find myself liking him. Who knows why, but I just couldn't.
either way, it's not a bad thing, especially considering just how how the way everything else is set up.
Hmm.
But nothing wrong with that, if you ask
And
me.
yeah, and that's another thing. I don't want to sound like a hater, but I already mentioned the things that I did like. But for example, the romance in the movie is not my cup of tea because I just don't. I didn't feel it. Not even the last scene. It was just okay to me.
Yeah, it's not the most highlighting part of the film, but I will say that seeing
Nope.
Captain America sacrifice himself, when he was crashing a plane, was one of the best moments of the film, if you ask me. And one that I
Yeah,
remember
yeah, yeah.
most, I think nowadays MCU would try to downplay these moments,
Mm-hmm.
and like at one point a character would probably say some sort of stupid line before they die, and or they'd have the character sort of like recover from an incident and act like, oh, did that happen? Oh, good grief, ho ho ho. Whereas here, like, obviously we knew for a fact that Captain America was going to return to the Avengers, but the way they
Yeah.
set it up was making you wonder if he's actually going to come back in some capacity. And obviously, like he did, like we saw him come back to life near the end of the film. He's in modern day New York City with a lot of street lights and whatnot after being recovered
That
by Nick Fury.
that scene was cool. Gotta admit it.
Yep. Captain America that was a fish out of water because he's in a different time period now, the present day. But this
Mhm.
really, well, the funny thing is that this isn't the first appearance of Captain America. Like in the MCU, the first one that we actually got was a brief cameo during the first Hulk movie when the Hulk was like running away from all this sort of stuff and he bumped into what looked like a frozen body.
Yeah.
And Marvel Studios and nerd sites, that's how you do an Easter egg. You don't make like top 10 Easter eggs that you have to look up in a movie, which makes the movie so much good. That like listing obvious stuff, like listing an obvious reference, like say uh, the Spider-Man theme being played by somebody, or uh, a reference towards like a specific era of suits or an adaptation is not an Easter egg. A sudden surprise that you didn't expect from a previous bit of media is an Easter egg. You know, in retrospect, like the song "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" from Spider-Man 2, you could say is an Easter egg because it's not immediately obvious at first as to what it could be, what it has anything to do with Spider-Man. The fact that the old comics played the song's lyrics a bit, it becomes like a sudden surprise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
well,
basically phase one, though.
yep. And that's
It,
basically all
it
we have to say about Captain America: The First Avenger.
yeah, and just what you said already. Maybe the movie wasn't my cup of tea, like I already said, but at least it wasn't forced, and it was respectful towards the character, and it wasn't camouflaged with jokes during heroic or epic moments. It did what it had to do, and it presented character pretty well. So I kind of prefer that over a lot of things that are done today.
Yeah, like I think you could say the MCU nowadays is doing better than it did before when it comes to its Disney Plus stuff. Although the movie
Yeah,
itself, like Black Widow, the movie definitely not worth delving into. But I think you could say that stuff like WandaVision, Loki, Falcon Winter Soldier know how to do stuff better because like there's more room to breathe into and they just feel more like they feel better paced overall.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what I kind of miss
They were
about Phase One
yeah,
was that they felt much more like less about the gimmicks, more less about the Easter eggs, and more about just making the good product.
precise.
And will we cover the rest of the Captain America series? I don't know. Like maybe Winter Soldier, but I don't know if I want to give Civil War attention because that film I have a huge dislike towards, especially considering the fact that it was trying to copy the attention that was put towards Batman v Superman.
Yeah, you know what I would do? I would try to avoid Civil War because I don't feel like that's a movie. And I would
Yeah,
go for Winter Soldier one time because I'm kind of interested in what that debate can
yeah.
do with us.
Maybe in like 2024. Meanwhile,
Oh no,
meanwhile,
that's a little.
meanwhile, Obama in the trailer for the episode involved Power Ranger Samurai, War for Cybertron, the first Deadpool movie, and Sonic's movie was like expect Deadpool 2 discussions in 2013. Maybe I don't know. Like no boy, that's fucking 2023.
Oh,
But that's all for
okay.
today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time we'll review four subject matters.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
And hopefully we get to talk about our 1 year anniversary, which what we'll talk about that day, you'll find out soon. But until then, take care.